Eritrea is opposed to having naval foreign bases on its soil, it could be done, but you'd have to negotiate it, and saying you're going to use force is crazy.
Kwaku, picking up on what Martin was saying just a few moments ago, where do you think that Ethiopia would be looking to build its port? In Eritrea and Djibouti? Of course, Djibouti has a virtual monopoly over maritime trade in the region, or this port in Somaliland, which geographically is closest to Addis. Would Berbera make sense from a strategic perspective? What are the ramifications for that, though, for Somalia and Eritrea if Ethiopia were to build this port in Somaliland?
So Berbera makes sense because of proximity, but building there, it's a de facto recognition of the independence of Somaliland, and that's not good. That's not going to fly in the African Union. But the way to get around that is to work within IGAD. And so you probably have to solve the secession problem before Berbera becomes a real option, because you don't want Ethiopia going behind the African Union and recognizing Somaliland whilst Somalia is still contesting that. And so Djibouti, I think Djibouti is the other place that, because it already has the logistics, it already has the relationship with Djibouti. I understand that the port fees are very high, but you negotiate, you talk about that. And if relations with Eritrea is getting better, Assab is also a possibility. It's close to central Ethiopia, where the industrial parks are. And so that's what you do. You don't threaten anybody. You don't make reckless statements that can reignite conflict in an already turbulent region. That helps nobody. So that's what I think they need to do. Sit down and renegotiate the port fees in Djibouti, talk to Eritrea, try and get access to the ports in Massawa and Assab, and then maybe look at the Lamu option. But Berbera, you really have to be careful how you do that, because that will be de facto recognition of us.
Martin, what do you make of those reports about the stake in Ethiopian Airlines being offered to Eritrea? And do you want to? You started to expand upon, or would you like to expand upon your thoughts about where Ethiopia would want to site this port?
Well, I mean, I think if I was an Eritrean, I'd be delighted to have a stake in as successful a project as Ethiopian Airlines. It's one of the really successful airlines in Africa. Once it was, fighting with Kenyan Airlines, South African Airlines, but it's streets ahead of everybody else now, and it is fantastically well run. It certainly was until very recently. And let's see. I mean, I would be very happy to have that if I was an Eritrean, but I would be surprised if Ethiopia was prepared to give it up. I mean, I still think that the port of Assab, which has been lying essentially unused since the border war in 1998 to 2000 with Eritrea, and all you have to do is basically rehabilitate it, send back the Ethiopians who used to live there and used to act as the stevedores, and provide a lot of employment locally. It would be a great idea, and it would earn money for the Eritreans. And there's one other thing, which is that there's a huge potash deposit on the border between Eritrea and Ethiopia in the Afar region. And there's no reason why that should not be developed. Now, the Chinese have taken a big stake in it. That would mean building another port, probably, because it's such a big project. It's a 200-year project. So there are lots of things that they could cooperate on, but it does require talking, and waving a big stick and saying you're going to use force is not the way forward.
You mentioned China, Martin. What about Gulf nations and their continuing engagement in the Horn of Africa? What does that mean for Ethiopia's plans?
Well, it does mean that they are competitors, but I mean, they're competitors with everybody. The UAE has huge investments in a lot of the ports. For example, they had a big stake in Djibouti. They've got stakes in the Somali ports. And yes, of course, you've got to fight for your commercial rights, shall we say, within this. But I mean, these should be peaceful competitions, and there's no reason why the ports shouldn't be developed. and should become very successful. I mean, the Horn of Africa has huge potential, but it does need to learn to live with itself in a peaceful way. And if that can happen, there's no reason why it shouldn't develop and become a real boon to the whole of Africa.
Kwaku, as Martin was saying, that the region has huge potential. Is large-scale economic integration, do you think, a possibility in the near future, or a pipe dream? Can neighbouring nations benefit from Ethiopia's rapid economic growth riding on its coattails?
Absolutely. And Ethiopia is the largest country over there, 120 million people expected to double in population in 30 years. The economy is growing. And because it needs its neighbors, because it doesn't have access to the sea, there is interdependence built into that relationship. And so with a little bit of creative thinking, you could have a regional economy that works for everybody. And they need to talk, and Ethiopia cannot be threatening anybody. It already has problems with Egypt over the dam. It doesn't need any more conflict. And so regional organizations like, IGAD needs to get involved. They've been talking a lot about promoting regional trade, the Africa Continental Free Trade Area initiatives. Everybody talks about promoting intra-African trade. This is a golden opportunity to solve problems and create jobs for everybody in the region, and everybody can benefit if they work together. So no, we don't need threats. We don't need conflict.
All right, Kwaku. If we assume for a moment that his comments were directed at a domestic audience, they weren't for international consumption. You mentioned tension with Egypt. Do you think that Abiy Ahmed is the man to, while his plans are perhaps necessary as far as economic growth in Ethiopia is concerned, do you think that Abiy Ahmed is the man who can negotiate a deal, the right deal for Ethiopia and the region?
Well, he did win a Nobel Peace Prize, so I hope that he can make peace again. He's made peace with neighbors before. He made peace with Eritrea. He made peace with Sudan. He made peace with Djibouti. So he can do so again. And I hope that people in his party at home are encouraging him to seek cooperation. And also, remember, he made this statement in front of investors. No foreign investor wants to move to a region where there's conflict. And so this is one of the ways to scare off that foreign direct investment. He needs to stop that talk and figure out how to make peace. And I think that because he's made peace in the past, he can do so again.
Martin, would you agree with that?
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, one of the interesting things is actually the relationship with Egypt has now improved. They have agreed to find some way of dealing with the key issue, which is the Grand Renaissance Dam, which was built on the Blue Nile, and which the Egyptians and the Sudanese were very worried about. But it's only a hydroelectric dam. It's not going to use the water for Ethiopian irrigation. So the Egyptians now seem to be a bit more happy about it, and it's going to produce a lot of electricity, some of which will be available in Sudan, maybe further afield. And so you begin to see an alternative for Ethiopia where it ties into the region, develops the region, works with the region, and is a dynamo for growth. And that is certainly a possibility. But one of the big problems is that one of the neighbors in Eritrea, President Isaias, is very unpredictable. And you can never be sure when he's going to stir up conflict again. So, it's a tough region, hard to work in, but it can be done. And Ethiopia, could be a bastion of both development and peace if it's led in the right way.
But